We got the water, and we got the coffee. Let's make a video. What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? It is Jake talking about what else than computer science. Today, we're going to be talking about the AZ-900. It is a cloud certification provided by Microsoft, which I recently completed. It took 5 days, and I kind of just want to make a quick video going over the roadmap and how I approached the exam and the things I studied, what I looked at, some of the resources I used to make it an easier process for you. Because I know that sometimes you can just look at the syllabus that Microsoft provides and it's like, do all these things. But in reality, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to find out the fundamentals of the cloud services that Microsoft provides, as well as the cloud concepts and the security measures in place of these cloud services. So without further ado, let's hop into this video. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, so first off, we are using Obsidian. It is my favorite note-taking software, and as you can see here, we kind of have like a tree, a node-like structure, where we can start in the middle of what is the AZ-900 and then break off as, further thoughts develop. And for me, it's super nice to be organized, as well as, I guess, like the more notes you take, the bigger the thing gets, and it's kind of, satisfying to see it grow. So whatever, whatever makes taking notes fun is what we're about. So if we jump on in here, you're going to see that, there's going to be 4 main topics that we're going to be looking at here. One being the cloud concepts. It's going to be a fourth of the exam, really. We're going to have some, core services to look over, privacy and security, as well as pricing and support. At the end of the day, the AZ-900 is really about, the business. It's about the business and the price that these cloud services are going to cost, not necessarily how to utilize them. So always take it, with a grain of salt. You don't have to be an expert at each one of the services we're about to touch on, but you should, in one sentence be able to be like, this service does XYZ. So let's go back and hop on into one of these. Now, I think the first one we want to cover is this cloud concepts. That's a good starting point, especially if you haven't taken like an AWS or a Google cert. This is your first time getting into the cloud computing part of the world. It would be nice to have some concepts down. And the things I would talk about in this section are mainly going to be, one, your deployment model. That is going to be your private, your public, and your hybrid cloud. When we're talking about the cloud computing, we're talking about infrastructure. And some companies, they have server racks on premise, which would be like your private cloud, and some companies host it in Microsoft and Google and Amazon, and that would be your public cloud. And the hybrid is when you're combining both together. That is a huge concept that is going to come up on the exam, as well as serverless computing. What if the technology is so great to where now you can just plug and play your code? You put your code onto a service, and I guess Microsoft takes care of the infrastructure under it, and it just runs the code. You don't have to worry about checking out a VM or a container. None of that stuff. Resource management. How are we going to be logging into the cloud to begin with? They kind of have a bunch of tools in place to where you can go in and log in, manage your resources. The architecture goals. Why go into the cloud in the first place? I mean, it is scalable, it is fault tolerant, and you can do a lot as one person, but really, you're going to want to figure out why the cloud is important. And we're not going to there's a bunch of things to go over, so we're not going to talk about each one. We're just making a quick video, but these are questions to think about. These notes will also be online if y'all do want to take a look and jump into each one of these. So that'll be in the description below. Hosted on GitHub. So, and then also the types of cloud computing. I'm trying to think of what this was. And, yes, exactly. It's going to be your SaaS, your platform as a service, or your infrastructure as a service. And I really like this. SaaS, software as a service, is going to be for the customers. When we're using Gmail, if you're using Salesforce, if you're using, a service, an application, bam, a SaaS, platform as a service. Think of your Heroku. That was my go-to, but also databases as well. I mean, a database has the infrastructure in place for you to store data, but you can do with that data what you need to do. This SaaS is more constraining, and the ISS, the infrastructure as a service, is like when you're actually building the blocks of your infrastructure, essentially. So your virtual machines, containers, all that jazz. Good stuff. So that's going to cover cloud concepts. I think if we look back, the next is going to be the services. So let's do that. All right, we are going to come over here, and we're going to, I guess, increase this link distance, because it's going to get a little crazy. Let's get that repel force out there a little bit, okay? Make it nice and big. So when we're talking about services, we're talking about what Azure can provide us as developers, us as, architects, engineers, when we're making software solutions. I think one of the main places to start is with compute. When we think of the cloud, we think about, running things on the cloud. So any software you run on a cloud machine would be in your compute section. Big data services. Think about distributed computing. The problem is so big, you want to spread it across multiple machines to solve. There's some great services in here that can solve that. Storage, think of your network drive. Think of like your C and your D drive on your computer, but you want all your cloud machines to be able to, access the storage. It's going to be file specific, and I guess the reason why that's a big deal is because there's databases here too. And when it comes to databases, what we really care about is going to be that NoSQL versus SQL. Because there's a bunch of different services. They have like Cosmos, SQL database, Synapses, and there's a lot, as you can see. I'm trying to see them all. But there's a bunch of different services that are database. And I think at least for the exam, all you really need to know is if they say a database service, is it NoSQL or SQL? And the difference between those two, obviously, is going to be how that's organized in the database. So, okay, where do we go from now? Databases, fun. Integrated services, so the cloud. I mean, it's up in the air. It's the internet. When we want to talk to other services, maybe AWS, maybe an ERP, a CRM, some sort of tech stack device or thing, we're going to use our integrated services here to shoot messages between applications. There's IoT services, super cool for you Arduino folks with your ESP Wi-Fi adapters and everything like that. You can, the services that Azure provides, they can, I think, do like 2 million devices or something like that. So a bunch of IoT devices can connect. Super fun. Networking, for me, this was fun, so I took more notes. But essentially what networking is going to be is your load balancers. So if you have multiple machines, how the traffic's getting, routed to each one, as well as, DNS. If you're setting up a custom domain, you can't buy domains, but you can configure them. Note to self. As well as, these scaling sets will be the auto scaling capability. So as more traffic comes, auto scale. That's super nice for businesses and websites that expect, e-commerce at Christmas, for example. And then, you're also going to have your virtual private networks and just setting up your infrastructure in a way that it can only be accessible by certain IPs. That would be super helpful in this networking section. So those are like the core services. These are the core topics. And within each one of these services, you'll notice that there are so many services that fall into each. So with compute, you have this virtual machine, you have Kubernetes, you have Azure Functions, all this stuff, Azure Batch. Really, so we just talked about what types of service they talk about or that they have. When you want the specifics, either watch a more in-depth video, check out the Microsoft documentation, or you can click on these and look at them yourself. So now we're going to go, I guess, into the security and privacy part. So looking into the privacy part of the cloud, this was probably the part I struggled on the most. Mostly because there's so many of these services that do almost the same thing, but it's just a little different here and there. It's just a touch different. I think so we can just go across the board here and talk about some of these, but there are more. I would say that this video doesn't do a great job at explaining the the security and privacy, as well as another video might. But your Azure Security Center is going to be great for showing dashboards, showing a user interface of like one-stop shop, see all the things that are going on security-wise within your organization. There's like some California regulation, European regulation, you know, like a DRPD. I can't remember the names, but you know, there's like certain regulations that some apps have. Your Azure Security Center would be a great place to go and you know, see if your app is complying with these increased rules. Active Directory. This is, you know, big part of Microsoft, a big part of enterprises is, you know, having a place to authenticate your users, you know, within the domain. So only like the certified employees can log in. So if you were going to the cloud and you had your Active Directory on premise, it'd be a pretty big deal if you couldn't, you know, have your employees log in because their server that is on premise is gone. There's no Active Directory server. So what Azure does is they have a service called Azure Active Directory that will, you know, I guess migrate all the Active Directory records into the cloud so people can still work. Good stuff. Key Vault, that's going to do exactly what you think it does. It's like stores all the important things that need to be, you know, kept secret. It's like a certification, passwords, important information, and then, you know, all the services can kind of like link up and integrate into the Key Vault and get the secrets securely. So super nice. Azure Policies, I like to think of this as kind of going back to the Active Directory reference, you know, like security groups, user permissions. You can kind of set policies in place to where, hey, this group of users can do X, Y, Z. This certain user can read and write these files. There's also the ability to lock files if you're an administrator so that no one can delete a file or no one can edit a file. Super nice there. Azure Sentinel. This is going to be like your threat detection software. It has really nice, you know, map of how your devices look, but it's going to collect data, detect if you know, there's threats within the system, investigate with AI, and respond if they, you know, find a threat. So this is your detection and mitigation software that Microsoft provides on the cloud. Going back to the security and privacy, trying to think if there's something else that should be talked about here. Yeah, and just authentication methods with, you know, multi-MFA. Super nice to know. And yes, these were some of the security policies that took place. There's also, I think, in here some good things like, we scroll down. Yes, the management groups. So management groups would be a way to organize your billing in a way that makes sense. So you can imagine, you know, one account. These subscriptions accounts kind of false, I will say. It's more like accounts can have multiple subscriptions, but a subscription has to map to one account. So here you can kind of see we have the I guess business, and then marketing, IT, human resources, and they have subscriptions to run, you know, whatever they have to run, and you can bill it by subscription, so that way the company knows who's using what, so which would be great. Azure Monitor is going to be great for creating charts and setting up alerts, all that jazz. Service Health, if an Azure service like doesn't exist or is like down for a certain period of time, Service Health is going to tell you why it's down, and I guess if it's your fault or if it's Azure's fault, which if it is Azure's fault, then sometimes you can get money back, which is super cool. Azure Advisor is going to be your cloud consultant friend that I guess tells you what the best practices are. He's going to recommend you things and make sure that your infrastructure that you developed is, you know, is working the best it can, kind of thing. And these SLAs, these service level agreements, are going to be important. I think there was like 3 or 4 questions on the exam that dealt with them. But this is like the guarantee of uptime that Azure provides, essentially. So if a service is like, you know, 99% of the time running, that's an SLA. That means like if you were to buy this service for a month, it will be up 99% of the time, and Azure guarantees it. So cool. Let's go back, talk about the last section, which is going to be pricing and support. All right, and this last section we talk about is going to be the pricing and support. I know it's the most boring part, but you know, as the certification goes, as the test goes, sometimes you have to learn some things that are just meh. But I guess it's how the world works. So, all right, so we're talking about, I think the first thing to talk about when it comes to pricing and support is going to be that capital versus operational expenditure. And what this is kind of showing is it's going to be like, why should you go to the cloud? Because if you, I guess, want to buy and have an on-premise server, you have to buy, you know, the firewalls, the infrastructure, yada yada yada, all the cables, set it up, pay someone to come set it up, kind of thing. So that's like your capex, spending money up front on physical infrastructure. Whereas the operational expenditure is like you're paying for what you use. You're paying for what you use. That's a big selling point for, you know, why you should move to the cloud, especially as like a small company where, you know, this capital expenditure could be huge, as you don't have to go in debt, you know, up front. You can kind of make it as you go. So super nice. That's going to be, that's probably the biggest point to make out of the pricing and support part. We talked briefly about these Azure subscriptions. And again, you know, each account has a subscription. And the subscription is what allows, you know, resource groups and the services to get used. All the services map to a subscription, which maps to an account. Think of it that way. And we have the marketplace, and this is where you can get some third-party solutions. Super sweet. You know, each app kind of has like, or each company has a marketplace, it seems these days. So it is what it is. Your TCO calculator is going to estimate the savings by migrating to the cloud. So this would be something you'd be like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Let me just, you know, have a really in-depth calculation on how much we would save. The Azure support plans. So this is going to be talking about, you know, what you get if you're a basic, if you're a developer, if you're standard, and if you're a professional. I guess the thing to take away from this is that if you are a company that is like using Azure and something goes wrong and you don't know what's wrong, they will answer your call within an hour. They'll be like, oh, we are here to help. So that customer service is going to be great. And I think, you know, as the support plans go, it's one of those things where, you know, I guess like just memorize the different levels and know which services you get. So I think if you're a developer, you don't even like, you know, get 24/7 phone support, for example. So it's like, there you go. That would not be fun. But we're developers. We can figure it out ourselves, guys. That's what we do. And yeah, dedicated host. If you wanted to buy out a whole entire machine, that is possible. Maybe for compliance reasons, no other virtual machine could be running on this host that Azure provides. So you can just rent out the entire machine that's on the stack, which is kind of cool. There is a pricing calculator, which you know, should be looked at as well. This is like for actually estimating your cost in the future and all that jazz. So fun things. But that is going to be the basics of the pricing and support. You can kind of see here the service credits. So if you know, if the service was down less than 95%, so if it was down for like a day out of the month, that'd be less than 95%. Then you would receive 100% of your money back for that month. Super cool. And this composite SLA is saying like, hey, we have a service that's like 99.99 and a service that's 99.9% up. How do we, you know, I guess combine the SLAs into one? I don't understand how that equation equals that, but it does. So there you go. Yes, pricing support, kind of dull, but something that will be brought up on the exam. So let's just take a step back and talk about next steps. So for me, when it came to studying, what I ended up doing was, one, reviewing the Microsoft documentation on the exam. Like, what is going to be on the exam? It does vary between, you know, years and months. So if you're watching this 6 to 8 months down the road, the test is going to be probably different. There's going to be some different things that are leveraged more. So, you know, go to the actual page, which we will do in a sec, and look and see what the requirements are. There's going to be a couple of Microsoft docs that kind of just briefly go over the material. I think it's great, especially like right before the exam, to just go over all the documentation, because you don't even have to read it. You can kind of skim through it, and maybe you'll like see something you haven't seen in a video, and you're like, whoa, what is that service? And you can just read up on it a little bit, make a note, and bam. So you'd have like the official definition that's going to be used on the exam instead of someone that's talking like me. Second thing I would do is watch a free code camp video. A lot of the screenshots that you saw here were from various videos and from various documentation. Just watch a video that goes in depth. Usually they're like 3 or 2 hours long, which does suck, but it's gonna go in depth with everything that Azure provides. And third, I would look up a YouTube video, or just look up, I guess, some of the practice questions that could be on the Azure AZ-900. Because taking your first cloud certification, especially if it is your first, like what do you expect? How hard is it going to be? So you can kind of get a sense of what the questions will be. We are computer scientists at the end of the day, and so we love Google. We love using Google. So use Google to find answers on how difficult are the questions going to be. And so let's open up some of these resources. We have the AZ-900 official Microsoft document here, on their certifications AZ-900 right here. And you can kind of see where you go to buy it, where you go to take it, and the skills measured, as well as some, free learning paths that Microsoft provides. These would be the documents that you would want to just glance over and see if there's something new that you haven't seen in a video. And then finally, for, watching a video, watching a full course, I would recommend the free code camp. They are great. Andrew Brown, watched this video myself. It was great. Learned a lot. And it was only 3 hours. 3 hours to learn certification. Not bad. Before finally, just looking up some questions online, wherever may that be. So at the end of the day, guys, freaking go ahead, schedule that exam a week. Set a date, set a deadline for yourself, so that way you actually get the ball rolling. Take 2 days to learn the material, and the rest of the time just to review and review. I have faith. Y'all are going to kill it. Or if you're not going to take the exam, I hope that you learned something from this video in cloud concepts and Azure services. So, all right, that's going to be it for me. Peace.